Beta Upsilon Chi, Bucks, presents Man to Men, the premier audio journal for men who live faithfully and lead courageously. I'm Jared Musgrove, and today we welcome Trevor Bragdon. He is the founder of Seven Figure Fundraiser. Welcome, Trevor.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jared.
Man, I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the past year as we talk about something that I think a lot of men, a lot of ministries, and a lot of nonprofits need to do more of, but are uncomfortable doing, and that's fundraising. That's asking. That's just stepping into that space. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. I wanted to open up and just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. When people hear fundraising, they often think of, pressure, some sort of awkward dance at a dinner or, a gala, or maybe even just money problems or feeling like I can't help here. As I've sat with you over the last year, you see things very differently. I would love to just hear from you and let the guys listen in. What is fundraising at its core as you've spent really your adult life in this space?
Sure. That's a great question, Jared, and a very big question to kick it off with. So I think when it comes to fundraising itself, the reason I think a lot of people find it awkward is we often associate fundraising with feeling like a beggar, right? Like that Oliver Twist where it feels like if you're asking for money, you're more of a supplicant and maybe somebody will feel sorry for you, have pity for you, and give you some money. But the reality is, fundraising isn't like that at all. What you have is you have donors who really care about a mission or the vision of a nonprofit and want to have an impact. And then you have the leaders of the nonprofit who have the team, the talent, and then they, have that vision that they want to execute. And it's about them partnering together to make an impact. That's actually what fundraising is. It's donors partnering with great organizations, great people to make it happen. But I think where the disconnect comes from, Jared, is for all of us, we're asked for money all the time. Like I was just at the pharmacy locally, and I was asked to give $1 to some local charity when I was checking out. And I always put no. That makes me probably sound like a bad fundraiser, but it's like such a weird ask. It's not, I don't know the organization. I don't know how they spend the money. Or you get something in the mail that's kind of unsolicited. You don't really know where it goes. So we're asked all the time with these really small, sort of tiny donations. And so it seems like that's how fundraising is. It's these sort of interruption ask. But in reality, when you look at nonprofits across the spectrum, and there was a study that just came out recently that looked at this, you find that fundraising is actually really, really concentrated. So looking at donors, the amount of money donors give each year, donors who give more than $5,000 a year, that makes up only about 2.5% of all the donors out there. But they contribute about 75% of all the money at these nonprofits that were in this study. So you have this small number of people who are driving a lot of the impact and a lot of the money at these nonprofits. So that's why fundraising seems like a disconnect. Like it seems like it's all small donors because that's what we interact with all the time. That's the checkout, the ask, that's, the monthly giving to sponsor a child. Like those are smaller donations. But what really drives a lot of fundraising for nonprofits is much bigger gifts.
And so thinking about that and thinking about particularly our space, because you do a lot of coaching in this space for all kinds of nonprofits, political, secular, but also Christian, and you're a man of faith yourself. So thinking about our men who are listening in, mostly Christian men, for a Christian man, how does how we engage money affect the way we think about fundraising? It's not just income. There's a bigger conversation going on here, stewardship.
So I think with stewardship, and so we just talked about how major donors drive a lot of giving. That doesn't mean if you can't give $5,000, you're off the hook, right? Like we can't do that. But I think giving is about thinking through the money that I have doesn't belong to us. Like God gave us the ability to make the careers that we're in, earn the money, and a portion of that belongs to Him. Like I've always been a big believer in tithing. We give away 1/10 of our money since I was, I think either starting college or in high school. I don't remember, very early on. And so I think there's part of it is you have to give, even if you're only making a few $1,000s a month, a few $100s a month, like still give some of that because it makes us less greedy. And it makes us like, if you're giving from a percentage from your first fruits and you're giving that away, it just makes it so you can see impact, but you're also trusting God that I can give this away and there's going to be enough left over at the end of the month or the end of the week to do that. So I think regardless of how much money you earn, you should be giving a portion of that away. And maybe it's not 10%. I mean, I think that's generally sort of one of the advised amounts, but you could start with 2%. You could start with 1%, particularly if you're young. It just really is helpful because you start looking and thinking about like, who are good organizations that I should work with, or what is my church doing if you're giving it to your church. And it helps you think of money differently. But then if you're a fundraiser and you're not giving away money, you're kind of a little bit of a fraud because you're asking people to give to you when you're not doing it yourself. So I think if you're a fundraiser, you absolutely have to be. But the bigger thing is it makes us better people and makes us less attached to money. And money's, the love of money is the root of all evil. Like money's a tool. It's not good. It's not bad, but it helps us accomplish things. And so using that to accomplish things with, longer term value, whether it's saving lives or helping your community, that makes us a better person. And it helps, I think, the whole community as a whole get better when we're all generous.
And you're saying you ran into and started practicing this principle early as a young man. Oh, that says a lot about you, man. It does.
Well, honestly, it was really mirrored well by my parents. We grew up in not rural Maine, but grew up in Bangor, Maine, which is pretty far north. It's not like rural, but it's like 28,000 people, and it was the third biggest city in the state. So it's pretty small. But my parents were always really generous my dad was a dentist, and he used to do charity care for some of the people in the community, the pastors, and just was generous of both time and money. And so having that mirrored growing up, I think, makes it seem less strange to adopt that early on. So I can't say it was because of me. It's mostly my parents were generous people.
Yeah. Where do you think, and we're still thinking about our conversation with fundraising, but where is good stewardship and fundraising, maybe actually more about discipleship than dollars, Trevor? Because that's what I'm hearing some in your story, is this is something I saw modeled. This is something I saw practiced. And from the beginning of my life, this is something I said, I want to and need to practice this. So where do you think that comes into how we raise our children, young men and women, and even just how we disciple others as well, older men to younger men?
Yeah. Well, I think it's showing that no matter how successful or unsuccessful you feel, you trust that I can give away part of this and it'll come back. But it's great to see that, like, to think of that on paper and like intellectually sort of know that we can trust God. But when you see other people do it and it works out, that's where I think that modeling and that sort of discipleship comes in, because it's way easier to look at somebody and see the positive results of it than it is just to hear somebody say that it works. So I think, we have 3 kids ourselves. Like, I want them to be generous people, generous with their money, but generous with their time, generous with, their talent, their skills, like all the things God gave them, you need to be generous of. And money is one of those. But I think the stewardship part of it is modeling this behavior for the people around you. And it's not, some people like to give really privately. We don't put our names on building, we're not sort of those sort of people. We like to be more quiet about it ourselves. But your family should know. Like, we've had discussions with our children about how much money we give. We support a charity that's based in Ethiopia in a big way. We know their founder. And we talk about why we give that money, because, American dollars go so much further. They're able to help 50,000 people a year at their facility. So we have those conversations with our kids so they can realize, A, they have a great life here in America. Like, life is pretty easy relatively. And then you can see, but with who much is given, much is expected. And so that's just part of that giving and modeling it with your kids. I don't know if I
No,
answered
I
that
think
question
so. The real
as
life example
quite how
is
you
most
wanted, but
helpful because we've got, we were talking a little bit as we were pre-gaming, and I say this on every episode just because the guest usually asks is like, who am I talking to? Well, you're talking to men, age maybe 18 all the way up to, it's like, we got some 68-year-olds who listen to the show, So I know that you're covering the gamut of really a man's adult life. So I think that giving us the imagination for giving us stewardship is really important.
can I just add one thing? With that age gap, I think one of the things people don't realize is sort of the lifetime journey of someone who's really like
That's good.
philanthropic, giving away a lot. Like most of the time when they're younger, you're giving away like part of your income. Like if you're generous, you're giving a tithe or some like percentage of income and it's coming out of your cash flow. But like some of these people we talked about, like these really much larger donors, they usually give out of wealth they're created through a business. And so you see them usually giving later in life. And sort of the life cycle you follow is you have a bunch of people who have a salary, do well, so sort of your income creeps up over time and they keep giving like a percentage of income over time. And they, over the lifetime, 10% of anything adds up to a lot and being very generous. But you also see like some of the biggest donors are people, in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, because they've had a chance usually to build a business, haven't made a lot of money, necessarily in their 30s and 40s. But once their kids graduate from college, they sort of take care of their family. They start looking forward for those last, 3 decades on how do I make an impact? And they start giving a lot of times a lot bigger amounts of money because they have more than they need. And they feel like they can have a big impact with the money that, God's given them through their success.
One thing that I find fascinating about you, Trevor, is that you have done a lot of work in human behavior. You have degrees in this. One thing that I've seen you emphasize in your fundraising training is the importance of relationship. Share with us a little bit about your studies as how humans behave and how relationship is so vital to giving. You've teased it a little bit here, as far as like, hey, these are organizations we know, these are people we know. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how that goes into how you train fundraisers.
Sure. So my background originally graduated from college in 2004, worked on a presidential campaign, George W. Bush's reelection, and worked in politics for a decade. But what I always found really fascinating was like what made people like decide how to vote or actually decide to go to vote. And so I remember I think it was 2014, doing these interviews with people who decided not to vote in an election. And we were just talking, kind of finding out, you thought you were going to vote, then you ended up not going to the polls. What was it? And what was interesting is they said, it's because I never figured out the election. And we kept hearing that phrase over and over again. And they didn't vote because they didn't decide on the top of the ticket. And in this case, it was a US Senate race. But that like really stuck with me on like, wow, people don't want to make the wrong decision voting, so they don't vote at all. They'd rather not do it than do that. So that led, like, I guess it's like analysis paralysis. Like you didn't feel confident, so you decided not to do it. So you didn't make a wrong choice. Like people are very afraid of making the wrong choice. Like we're all sort of loss avoidant, which is a good thing. And most of the time, but that led to like looking at like, okay, what if I dove more into this? How could I find out more? And so I ended up going over to London, to the London School of Economics, and getting a master's in behavioral science there. And while I was there, we started talking. My brother had founded a nonprofit and he was starting to raise a lot of money with it. We talked about like, could we figure out using what I knew about psychology and consumer behavior, and could we put together a program that made it easy to understand fundraising for nonprofit leaders? Because there's so much fear, but uncertainty and, not really misinformation, but wrong ideas out there on what fundraising is and then how to do it. So it's been this fun journey, but I think at the heart of it, to answer, the beginning of your question there, is fundraising is about a partnership between the donor and the fundraiser in the organization. And you have to really think about it that way. You can't think of yourself as Oliver Twist begging for money. So you can't have like a poverty mindset about it. Instead, you have to think of yourself like, hey, I'm a partner. We have this really big plan of what we're going to do and what we're going to execute and this impact we're going to have on our area or whatever we're working on. And there's great people out there who want to partner with other great people. And I need to make the case in the best way possible and ask them for money. And then it's up to them to decide, because we're never entitled to anyone's money. It's their money. They made it. And they're the stewards of it, and they can decide to give it to us. But it's that partnership. They decide to give on their free will, and we execute to the best of our ability and keep them updated.
That's fun.
Throughout
That's
that.
fun. And in your work, you've done a lot with various individual leaders, but also big organizations. Where do you see most often the breakdown in an approach to fundraising, as far as an attitude, a stewardship, a philosophy? Just where do you see some of the breakdown happen across organizations where you try to train?
So I think it comes down to two different things on the breakdown. One is with the leadership, where people hope, if you're the executive director, sometimes you get hired because you do a good job at the work of the business or the organization, but then you have to learn fundraising sort of on the fly. And you think like, oh, okay, I can delegate this. I'll hire a development director and have them take care of it. But those biggest donors want to meet with the executive director, the CEO, because they're just used to doing business that way. So I think sometimes people think fundraising makes me uncomfortable, I'll delegate it. And that's never that successful. But on the flip side of that, like, everyone can get better at fundraising because it's literally just a skill. It's like any other skill that we have. Like, think of all the things you've gotten good at. Like, you're good at doing a podcast. Like, I'm sure you weren't naturally good at this, but you trained and got better at it. And so it's just like that. You learn how to do it, you practice it, you improve, you do more reps, and you get better. So that's the first point. Like, it's the leadership thinks they can delegate it. And then the second part is people don't understand where the revenue actually comes from. So even people who give money in a big way often think that most money comes from small donors. And we discussed at the beginning, it's really not the case. But what you do see is there's tons and tons of people who give a little bit, and it's probably a significant amount of their money. So it's not like a little bit to them, but there's like 90% or 80% of people give in some smaller way. But then what really drives the revenue and the success of an organization is a few hundred donors who invest in a bigger way. So like those two contrasts, like, I want to delegate it and not deal with it, but then really thinking about like, there's maybe 25 relationships that really drive the success of my organization. I need to make sure that those people are updated. I need to make sure they treated really well. And I really need to understand like why they give. So when I make a presentation, make a pitch to them, I am appealing to what they find valuable about our organization.
Oh, that's good. Well, and this is great because we've got some executive directors and some CEOs who are regular man-to-men listeners. We've also got a lot of men who serve on different boards across the country. That could be just their church elder board. They've got a building campaign or something along those lines, or they're serving for a nonprofit or another committee where we've got to go raise some money. You've worked extensively with whole boards and leadership teams. Why is it, Trevor, that you found that board giving and asking is such a critical issue? And why is it often so weak? Let's just let the cat out of the bag.
So I'm the chair of the board of the Grace Center of Ethiopia, where we talked about earlier. So I've been a member, been on the board, been on a couple other boards as well. And I think there's probably a couple of reasons for it, but I see with nonprofits, there's this thought that, again, it's that fundraising makes us uncomfortable, so we want to delegate it to somebody else. So often they like kind of blame the board. Our fundraising isn't good because our board doesn't raise any money. It's not really the board's job. The board's job is to govern and oversee the workings of that nonprofit. Like, they have a fiduciary responsibility to be good board members to make sure that nonprofit is run well. The fundraising really is the job of the executive director, and you can the board of directors can help you. Like they can refer people to you. They can make asks themselves. But most members of nonprofit boards are not good fundraisers. Like they've never trained. They have success in business or outside. They have like lots of connections in the community. There's a reason they were picked to be on the board, but they're not instinctively fundraisers, and it's not their job. Their job is to govern and help make decisions, where the job of the CEO and the team is to raise the money. So I think where you can be really helpful as a board member is providing referrals to your executive director on like, hey, here's a business connection, or here's someone from our church that we know likes to give. Like maybe they like to give to missions. I know that they have a heart for Africa. And so I want to refer them to the executive director. In this case, it would be like Marcy Erickson, who's the executive director of that group. And then do a warm handoff, but then it's up to her to schedule a meeting. And maybe I'd follow up if she hasn't heard back or something, like helping smooth that over. But it's not really the board member's job to make the ask. Now, on the flip side of that, what I do think is the board member's job is, if you're on the board, you have to give to the organization. Like, I don't understand why you would be on a board and not financially
you anticipate my next question.
Even if it's $100. Yeah. Like you don't have to be giving $10,000. I mean, some boards have the give-get rules on it, which I think that's okay. But the fact you have to have a rule means people are probably just going to come up to the minimum. So you might be better off just having a policy or a culture that everyone gives. But I think everyone should at least give $100 or what they're able to.
Yeah. What does it communicate when leaders are not personally invested financially in the mission that they're overseeing, not just to target board members or volunteers, but also staff? Where have you seen that? What does that communicate?
Well, if your leadership doesn't prioritize fundraising, then who's going to? I mean, is your development director like, it's going to be like pushing a stone uphill. It's like that Sisyphean task where if it's not it has to be part of the organization. It's like having a business where you don't prioritize the sales. Like it just doesn't work that way. So I think what you need to show as a leader is you care about fundraising. It doesn't have to be the only thing you do. It can be part of the time, but you also are signaling to your employees and your staff, like, how do we treat donors? How do we talk about them? That whole partnership starts with you and how you refer to donors. Like one of the things we talk about sometimes is like making sure you're never using language that like dehumanizes the donors. Like, when you get a big fish or like these sort of sales language you see creep into fundraising, because at the end of the day, they're human beings who are giving money and giving wealth that might have taken them 30 years, 40 years to build. And they're giving it to you because they believe in your cause. Like that is a great responsibility. And so what you don't want to do is ever signal like, this is not a partnership. You want to make sure we're honoring them, honoring their commitment, and keeping them updated. But that starts at the top. The way the leader signals goes down to all the levels. I don't think necessarily, like if you're an employee of a nonprofit, I don't know if you need to donate to that nonprofit. I think that's a little weird because it's
I guess that's
circular.
Right, yeah.
Like if you give $100, like you're knocking off $100,
So
like
true.
it's coming from your pay. Like, I mean, some nonprofits have those rules and that's fine. Like I don't think it's wrong, but I also don't think it's necessary. But I do think even if you work at a nonprofit, you should still give a portion of your income away. And if you decide to give it to your nonprofit, that's fine. Like you're all in. But it's also interesting though to give to other nonprofits and see how you're treated. Because that sometimes helps you improve how you treat your donors. Because if someone forgets to thank you, kind of are like, hey, what's going on here? Why aren't they thanked? Then you realize like, oh, we didn't do that for one of our donors. And we wrote it off as, oh, it was a busy time, and then when you are in the other end experiencing it, it's a lot different.
I want to circle back to something you talked about. You mentioned earlier, some of the biggest wrong ideas. And one of those is the misconceptions we have around wealth, or particularly wealthy donors. What are some of the misconceptions around wealthy donors? If you're running a nonprofit, you've got them. At least you hope you do.
Yep.
You know who they are,
Yeah,
or at least
hopefully.
you should. What are some misconceptions around people with wealth who donate to nonprofits?
So I think sometimes you think because somebody looks wealthy that they would be a good donor. And that really all depends on A, whether that person's philanthropic. Like some people are not philanthropic. And that, again, that's their decision. It's their money. I think everyone should be philanthropic to some extent, but some people just aren't. So you sometimes see people that seem like they should be, and then they don't really give. So you're kind of going after potential donors who don't actually give. So that could be one thing where only a percentage of the population, not a percentage, but a subset of the total population gives. The other thing is a lot of people think people give just for the tax write-off. And that might be true in lower giving, but if you think about it, it's not really true because you'd still be better off keeping the money, like better off financially, like from an accounting sense, keeping the money and just paying taxes on it because you'd have more left over than if you gave it away. So people don't really give for tax benefit. It's helpful, but major donors don't give for those reasons. What you do find though is most major donors in the US who are giving in a big way typically are first generation wealth. They've created the wealth themselves, and usually it's from founding or starting or growing a business. Sometimes it's second generation, like the father or mother starts the business and then someone takes over and they really expand it. Sometimes you get second generation there. But most of it is they built their wealth by being entrepreneurs, taking risk in the marketplace. And so they think like entrepreneurs, and that life journey we talked about a little bit is, if you're an entrepreneur in your 20s and 30s, often you don't make a lot of money. If your business is growing, oftentimes you're reinvesting money right back into the business. So even if it looks like from the outside, like, oh, you have this business, you have 5 or 15 employees.
Yeah, that's not liquid.
You might not have any cash because it's all going back in. Right. Yeah. So you can't really give. And so then in the 40s, things start to click. Often you start to make a little profit. Things start going better. And then in your 50s, your kids, start graduating from high school, going to college, you're paying for weddings and those sort of things. So even though you might have more money in your 50s, you're still not quite in the prime giving window of your life. But what we find is mostly once your kids leave the house and those big expenses are gone, people really start looking forward and thinking about, what sort of legacy they want and start giving in a much bigger way. And the thing as a fundraiser that's easy to do is we tend to meet people at that point. So we meet them in their, late 50s, early 60s when they're starting to get involved, starting to give in a bigger way. And so it might be, if you get a 6-figure gift from someone like that, it seems like that's amazing, but they have lots of money. And you think wow, I wish they'd given me, 200,000 or something. Like sometimes you can have these thoughts in the back of your head. But what we often forget is that first 100,000, might have taken that person 45 years to build. They might have been worth that for 20, 25 years of toiling away at their work. So it's always important, whatever they give, you are incredibly grateful for it because it usually represents, years and years of hard work and risk and all the things that went into making that business successful. And now they're being generous with it, which is amazing.
Man's Men is made possible in part by our partners at Southern Seminary. Guys, when your ministry calling is serious, the people who prepare you matter. At Southern Seminary, you'll study under pastors, scholars, and faithful leaders who've guided generations of gospel ministers. They are known for teaching God's word with clarity and for living it out with integrity. If you're ready to be trained by trusted faculty for a lifetime of faithfulness, start your MDiv at Southern Seminary. Visit sbts.edu/MDiv. Well said. Well said. That's great. That's gold, man. Thank you for that. I want to continue down the generational path with something I just read this morning. And I want to see if it's lining up with what you're seeing, particularly in just giving trends with nonprofits. I read this morning from the Nonprofit Trust. Here's the average annual giving by generation, just ballpark. The silent generation average annual gift is $1,300. Baby boomers are $1,200. Gen Z is $785. So, okay. Gen X is about $732. Millennials come in at the lowest, at $481 annually giving. That's one study, but I'd love to hear just from someone who's on the front lines working with dozens of nonprofits at a time. What are you seeing as far as generational impact of giving? There's a lot of narratives out there. I read one study. How's that line up, and what are you seeing?
Most of the time, I kind of hate the pitting of one generation versus the
You're a good
other.
millennial. Yes.
Like you can go back and there's like,
I hear you. I hear
yes.
you.
I'm like right on that border. I'm 41. So like, I don't identify as a millennial, but I really am
you and me
one.
both.
But yeah.
We're zillennials.
Yeah. I think we both started college in 2001. Right. And so I hate that pitting of one generation. Like there's a Socrates quote where he's complaining about the next generation's terrible because all they do is hang around and no one's serious. And this is, 2,000 years ago. So there's like, that's like a persistent narrative all the time. I think right now you don't see millennials giving as much as because millennials are in their 30s and 40s. So if you have kids, these are some of your highest expense years, and your income, if you're a professional, might not have reached its peak yet. So you have school costs, kid cost, all those things, and you have the squeeze of your mortgage, like all of these things of a young family life. So that's probably why you're seeing that. But I would guess if we look back 20 years, whatever the whatever the 40-year-olds would be in that case would probably be more representative of that. So you tend to just see giving go up as people get older because your expenses go down.
No, that's helpful. That's really clear. Thank you for taking that tack on that because you and I see those kinds of studies all the time. That's a helpful perspective.
Yeah. And I think it's like this 80-20 too, like why every generation says that is because you look at the entire generation as a whole. And with any generation, it's a percentage of people who have the big accomplishments, do the incredible things. Like usually it's like 20% of people do 80% or that 80-20 rule. 20% of people have 80% of the outcomes or 20% of customers contribute 80% of the revenue. So you're looking at the generation as a whole instead of later 20 years, you'll see that 20% who are really driving sort of the societal change and
I love that.
The different aspects of it.
See, that's where it's helpful to,
And it's the 20% looking back who are judging usually because they're the writers, they're the people who are writing these studies. It's like, no one's like me. It's like, yeah, no one was like you when you were a teenager either, probably. And, it's just how people are.
Can I ask you to engage with another myth that sometimes makes us uncomfortable in fundraising? I'll form it in the form of a question. Is asking for money manipulative? And I'm asking someone who has studied behavior. Because sometimes it can feel like, we're making a hard sell or it's just an awkward pitch like we talked about at the top of the podcast.
Sure. So asking for money, of course, could be manipulative. But there's like a difference between manipulation and persuasion. So the difference is manipulation is getting somebody to do something that's against their best interest. And then persuasion is getting somebody lining things up to convince someone to do something, but it's not against their best interest. Like it's good for them to do. So it's sometimes a fine line, right? Because it's your intent, like what you're doing. If you're really pushing somebody. When I was first in college, my first job in college was selling credit cards at NBNA, which was this bank that sold a bunch of credit cards. And I was 17. So not old enough to actually own a credit card, but somehow that didn't keep me from selling them to people and, helping people get into debt. And I really enjoyed that work because it was like the first sales job I ever had. Like I learned how, all these different techniques and you could just, listen on the phone and people would pause and you'd be like, okay, I think I got this person. And then you'd kind of do all these different tactics that they would teach you. But the challenge with that job is oftentimes they pushed you to close the sale kind of and overcome objection after objection after objection, even though at your heart, you knew this person probably didn't need it. And I remember we were doing balance transfers. This was after 9/11. Interest rates were really low. And we had this script about like, we don't know how long these low interest rates will last. It's like, spoiler alert, 15 years. But, at the time, we were like really pressuring people to do balance transfers. And I had this older woman, probably in her late 60s, early 70s, that I got on the phone, talked to her, and used overcame every objection, like went through that script just like I was supposed to, and ended up convincing her to transfer $10,000 from her credit card, which had a zero balance, to her checking account in case she needed the money for something. Now that was manipulation, really. I mean, did I actively go out to try to harm her? No, I was following the script, but when I got done with that call, I got a $10 commission because you got $1 per 1,000 you transferred. But after that, I ended up quitting that job after that call, the next day, because it's that fine line. You can't manipulate people to get what you want. But the great thing, so that's I've always tried to be careful because persuasion's a tool, like anything. You can use it, these same tactics to manipulate people as you can to persuade people. So you always have to be careful and follow your own internal compass with that. And, God provides, pretty direct feedback when you're, as soon as I hung up the phone, I felt pretty bad about it. After that, initial rush of you make a sale, you feel good. And then you're like, what did I just do?
It's real talk.
What if that was my grandmother, you know? Yeah. But on the flip side, when you have an organization that's doing amazing work and you're really good at doing the work, but you're struggling with the fundraising, often that's because you're not telling the story of the work you're doing in a compelling way. So what you want to do is, some of the best nonprofit leaders are the people who are really good at the work, but need to figure out the selling part of it. And so what you can do that can be persuasive is you just lay out in 6 to 8 minutes a really persuasive pitch to your donors, laying out hey, here's the problem we solve. Here's our unique solution. Think about it from the donor's perspective, how they see the problem and the solution. And then you talk about here's how it works. And usually you go through there's either 2 big things we do, there's 3 steps. You kind of walk them through. So you've gone and give them a little detail about the work. And then you add in a success story. So you say here's the 3 steps we do. That reminds me of this story of one of the people we helped 3 weeks ago. Tell a success story. And then you want to talk about, here's the big vision for our organization. In the next 3 years, this is what we're going to do. And you lay out a compelling case on why that donor giving today is going to make an impact on both the organization, but most importantly, the people that you're serving. And then you close with asking them for a specific amount of money. And this is where people sort of chicken out. They say, and give whatever God feels whatever God leads you to give. Well, I think God wants us to try really hard and work really hard. So why don't you just ask for an amount and trust that if they have it, God will provide. And if they don't, they will give you what they are able to. And usually with existing donors, you know how much they gave. So make a compelling case and hopefully ask them for more than they gave the year before, particularly if you're growing and doing great work. So I think that's the contrast. Long answer to persuasion versus manipulation. If you're laying out, here's the work we do, you can come join us, here's the vision. There's no manipulation in that. Yes, you're telling stories that will trigger emotion, get people excited. You're, ending with an ask and then stop talking and wait for them to respond. There's techniques in there, but none of those are to manipulate someone to take their money. If you were lying in that pitch, that would be manipulation.
I want to pause here, Trevor, and just say I do want to call out the fact that some of the men listening may not recognize the mini masterclass you just put on as far as the importance of vision and communicating that vision persuasively to potential and also current donors. Thank you for that. I mean, I would say, men, bookmark this, go back and listen to that. If you are thinking about calling people to partner with your nonprofit or your cause, Trevor, that was gold. Just fantastic, man. And I've been a great recipient of that through you guys and just some of your training and some of the work we're doing here at Bucks. And we're starting to see some returns on that. So
That's great. Well, and I think that's where you can get the biggest sort of bang for your effort is with your big vision. Because you think about if you have existing donors like you have with Bucks, like people, a lot of them are alumni, people or their kids or their grandkids have been involved. Like they really care about the mission of growing Christian men in college, right? So they're already bought into that. But if you can talk about here's what we're doing
Right.
in the next 3 years, and that's really exciting. And you can look at that and say, I bet, look at, your donor's name, Mr. Smith. I bet this would get him excited enough to double his giving. Like if you have a vision that's exciting and you can be that passionate about it when you're presenting it to them, then a lot of times they're going to say yes and increase. But the biggest ROI you can get is really sitting down and thinking about where are we going in the next 3 years, have some numbers around it. So it's not like, we're going to reach more people for Christ. Like, yes, that's great. We're all trying to do that. But like, let's get specific. These are business people we're talking to, we're not going off vibes. And then make that case and make that specific ask. But like the big vision, you can get thinking through, spending an afternoon, really imagining where you could go in 3 years, because 3 years is going to pass anyway. And we might as well be having a lot more impact because we have more resources and we've painted this picture of the future and how we can partner with these donors in a big way.
Show them the vision and your ability to achieve that vision, how you're going to do it. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah. It has to be realistic, right? It can't be, we're going to be at every college in the next 3 years. That wouldn't be believable. But, maybe you could double or maybe you could grow by 15, 25%.
You've been looking at my notes.
Quite what yours are. Right. No, but you could. Like, that's very believable. And there is, like, no one would deny colleges need more good Christian men. Like, if you're a Christian, no one's denying that would be a great thing to have on college campuses.
You've got an incredible insight into a lot of organizations, Trevor, that you've seen grow and scale the kind of impact you're talking about and we're inviting people into. What do you think are some of the bigger missed opportunities specifically for Christians when it comes to generosity?
So
that's okay.
This might get me in trouble, but that's okay. I think sometimes people have this view, Christians have this specific view that God will give if we need. Like if needed, God will provide. It's like that. I think this story is George Mueller, who was the famous missionary, and he never asked for money. And miraculous things happened, and God would they would run out of food at the orphanage, and then a cart would break down that was carrying bread, and the kids would be fed.
Yeah.
I think that's poor stewardship, frankly. It might have worked out, but maybe God thought he was a knucklehead and just helped him out because he was directionally accurate, doing good things. But he's like, I don't understand why he can't run a good business. But he's like, all right, we're going to have this truck break down in front of him and bring the bread in. So I think there's sometimes we equate maybe that was God rescuing him, not as a model for us to sit on our butts and not ask for money. Because that's the reality is it is difficult to ask for money. It's uncomfortable for everyone. But you know what's more uncomfortable is not doing great work, not having enough resources, having to lay off great team members because you haven't raised the money that you wanted to. So I think in the Christian giving space, yes, we rely on God, but God wants us to work really, really hard and do our best. And then God rewards really hard effort. But don't get into these narratives on we just need to have faith and that means I can sit on my butt.
Yeah. Now, I don't think that is as controversial as perhaps you think. In fact, the ancient monks had a dictum in Latin, ora et labora, pray and work. In that order, that's what we're talking about.
Exactly. Right.
So I think you're right in line.
Right.
Yes, pray, God does provide. And yet we get to participate with what he's doing in his world.
Right. And what good things happen in life without hard work? If you have a good marriage because you work really hard at it and you treat your wife really well. And it's never I've been married 17 years. There's times when it's not easy, but both of you work at it. If you have good kids, it's because you worked and are intentional at parenting. If you have career success, it's because you've really thought through what do you have to do in your job? what's the skill I need to gain next to be excellent? And you work on that. And then once you master that, like there's another skill, and like it's all hard work. So I like that quote, pray
right.
and work.
In that
There's
order.
no
I mean, like
hard
you
work.
can just, you can put that one in the Latin or the English right above your desk. I mean, it will be a nice little compass for you. I'd love to close, Trevor, like we do most episodes, with everywhere, every day. That's just some more personal questions with our guest about just how they live and move and be. It kind of comes out of my own curiosity about what different guys do all day. I know just from spending some time with you, you are on the road quite a bit. And I think a lot of our listeners would resonate with that, just in the different jobs that they do. So can you walk us through what it's like to be a faith-driven man in your work who has to travel a lot and yet balance family, church, just different things that are going on? Would love your perspective.
So I think with balance with travel, like there's seasons where it's more intense, at least with training, right? Like there's times of the year where there's a lot more travel. Like this next month, we were just talking before we started about like, I'm going to be on the road a bunch. But I think there's a couple of things. Like for you personally, like I think keeping your energy high if you're performing with travel, like I have this rule: if I go to a hotel, I have to work out at the hotel in the morning because like I've been doing presenting for a while now. I still have, a little bit of stress. You worry about it that first time you're presenting. Am I going to do a good job? And a great way to quell that is to get on a treadmill, run, lift some weights, and it's a hassle, right? You have to have more room for shoes, all the things, your smelly clothes.
In your room, if I remember correctly from your time here in Dallas. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yes. Sometimes you come into a room. I had a room when we were at the training we did that had a Peloton in the room. I thought they said it was the Pelican room, but it was really the Peloton room. Which was less exciting because I don't bike. But so I hung my suit on.
I was going to ask, did you at least try it?
Like many Pelotons.
Okay.
I didn't. I really don't like to bike, and I should probably be a skill I should work hard on. So I think like working out's an important thing. When I travel for work, I only travel to work. Like I don't go any longer than I need to be. I'll fly in the night before if you're, it's starting, make sure you're there and able to perform. But I don't golf. I don't do like when I'm in work, I'm on work. And then when I come home, I try to have really great routines with our kids. Like I drop them off at school every morning. Most of the time, my wife's able to pick them up with her work. And so, but my routine is to drop them off. We have ice cream Friday. Every Friday afternoon, we go out for ice cream when I pick them up from school. Which if I work, if I'm traveling, not home, our kids like, you didn't do ice cream Friday, so we have to do it on Saturday often. But I think having a few routines like that, the working out on the road is important. And I also think like you just be smart. Like if you're working, like if you're traveling for work, you're in work mode. You're doing things for work. Like don't think this is like work and play mode. Like you sometimes see people like they go, party a little bit, they get drunk, like these things on the road, and then they're not like performing at the same level. Like it's not summer camp. It's not like a free time. Like you're taking time away from your family, so it should be worth it. And if you have extra time, like focus on being excellent on why you're on the road, because being in person really does matter. Like relationships go deeper, but only if you're able to perform. I think the final thought is we talk about this, and you heard us do this riff in the training, but in most of our jobs, we have 100 hours in the year that really matter the most, like where we need to be at the top of our game. Like in fundraising, when you're sitting down one-on-one with a donor, especially those top like 40 donors, that meeting is probably the most valuable thing you're going to do in the year, those aggregate meetings. But it's probably only like 100 hours. And so when you're doing things that are high stakes, perform at a high level, but that happens only by preparing, like being there, being intentional, making sure you're setting up everything to be successful. So I guess that was a very long-winded answer to, it's not easy, but you like, just take it seriously. This is your job. Like if you're going to be traveling for work, like it's part of work, do it with excellence.
So good. So again, for you guys who travel or are going to have to, Mini masterclass just right there, last few minutes. Let me ask you this, Trevor. You've already dropped a lot of scripture just as you're talking. So you're a man who's Bible informed. You've grown up in the faith. You follow the Lord Jesus. What are places in the Bible that you find yourself returning to? Places or people that you just find yourself drawn back to, or that you would just say, hey, this was pretty seminal in how I developed a lot of what I've talked about today?
So I have always been a big fan of Proverbs. I know it sounds cliche, but and I'll do the whole read through every few months. I'm pretty dyslexic. So reading straight is tiresome. So I've never been great at reading every day. I love the Dwell app. I think it's amazing. And they have a lot of interesting things that they've done with that. So that's made my routine so much better because it's chunked it up. But I think part of it is, and maybe this is I teach not self-help, but teach personal improvement. I've always found Proverbs, it doesn't matter how much you've read them, you're always finding something new, something interesting, or just a different perspective given the season in life. My youngest is going into high school in the fall. So thinking a lot more about we have 4 summers left where he's at home. And so some of this stuff where they talk about, training up your child, it just rings different now because I know I'm on more of a clock. I have a responsibility as a parent to make sure he's ready to go into the world and be a productive human being and ready to leave. But also I want to spend as much time as I can during this short season that we have.
I love that. You're a good steward, not just with money, Trevor. That's what I heard when we were together here in Dallas, and that's what I think our men are learning about you right now as you share. Thank you for being open and honest the whole time. Last question for you, because we've got thousands of men who are Christian brothers listening in here. Just as they're going about their day, how can we be praying for you as we listen in?
That's a great question. I think the most rewarding thing I do is help people who are doing great work, but haven't quite figured out fundraising, of nonprofit leaders. So helping connect those people with whether it's our book that we have, that's really an easy read, just connecting them, because there's a lot of people who are sort of spinning their wheels, doing great work, having the impact, but they haven't figured out the money part and the donation side of it. And when those two connect, it's amazing seeing it take off, because you see these people who are really they should be running a $5 million company or organization, but they're stuck at 500,000. And once they figure that out, they take off. So I think praying that those people connect with our work, because that's the most rewarding part, is seeing people who they don't really change that much as people. They just figure this other thing out and they triple or quadruple or 5x their impact. And often they're not doing that much different work. Yeah. It's just they're able to scale it now that they have resources. So that's the funnest thing of my job. So I guess praying that I have more opportunities, but more people are able to do that.
Amen. Praying with you, man, that bears more fruit. Where can we connect with Seven Figure Fundraising and some of the work that you're doing?
Sure. So our website is sevenfigurefundraising.com, the number 7. And then our book is called 7 Figure Fundraising. You can buy that on Audible or Amazon. It's really short. It's 120 pages. Takes, I think it's 3 hours on Audible. So encourage you, if you're interested, those are the 2 things. The book's probably the quickest way to get an overview. And we also have a podcast, the 7 Figure Fundraising podcast, that
coming up.
You have a guest appearance on as well, Jared.
That's great. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Jared. It's great talking with you.
Man to Men is powered by Beta Upsilon Chi, commonly referred to as Bucks. What if I told you that one of the most spiritually transformative places on a college campus might not be a church program or a campus ministry, but a fraternity? That's Bucks. Everywhere, every day, Bucks men are raising families, leading in organizations, and strengthening churches to impact our communities for Christ. You can find out more about Beta Upsilon Chi by transliterating our Greek letters and adding a .org. That's byx.org. We are produced, rather well I might add, by the good gentleman at the Good Podcast Company. For Beta Upsilon Chi, I'm Dr. Jared Musgrove with Man to Men.